The American South is a place characterized by its agrarian roots, adherence to tradition, and its distinctly different culture from that of the rest of America. Limited technology and communication kept the South and its numerous rural communities largely isolated from the rest of the world. But all of that changed during World War II, when wartime manufacturing jobs brought workers and their families to southern cities from homes miles away. This movement would eventually lead the South into a more urban era. One person who was part of this movement was Sylvia Erk. Sylvia grew up in the heart of rural Cajun country near Lafayette, Louisiana.
I was born in Erath, Louisiana, in Vermilion Parish. At 6 o'clock in the evening, the church bells were ringing. This is my grandmother on my father's side. Her name was Idolee Thibodeau Guidry. And this would be my grandmother, my mother, her brother, and my great-grandmother in the background. We lived in Abbeville, and my dad worked at the rice milling plant, Louisiana Rice Milling in Abbeville, and his family lived in Abbeville, and my mother's family all lived in Erath.
At the time of World War II, Alton, Sylvia's father, was too old to serve in combat duty.
He wanted to do something in reference to the war effort.
So in 1942, Sylvia and her family moved to New Orleans, Louisiana, so that her father could take a job working at Higgins Industries, building naval vessels, such as the landing craft that would be used in the assault during the D-Day invasion on the beaches of Normandy. But moving to New Orleans, even though less than 100 miles away, meant changes in everyday life for Sylvia and her family.
Well, we definitely did Christmas different. Not so much that we didn't have a tree. We had the Christmas tree and you hung the stockings. But when we moved to New Orleans, I'd never heard of anybody, or it was like they thought we were kind of crazy. We hung stockings on New Year's Eve. And Pat Noel came and he brought you fruit. So it was healthy. People talked about red beans and rice. We had never heard of red beans and rice. And it was dried beans, and we didn't do that. Mm-hmm. We used fresh vegetables.
And then there were other changes that were not so subtle.
In the country, in Erath and in Abbeville, there were black people, but they weren't ostracized or anything, but they still weren't treated as equal as the white was. But it was like the black guy who came to cut your grass might have been your friend, and that kind of thing. And they all maybe had little truck farms, and they'd bring you vegetables. And so it was people that you were on first name basis with. Whereas when you moved to New Orleans, it was big time segregation. The buses were, the black had to sit in the back, the white sat in the front. The fountains were limited. Black people could not drink out the fountains that the white people drank out of. It was very, very segregated.
Sylvia's story is not uncommon for this time in the South. Families from all over the country were being attracted to the new labor jobs in the South, and the movement became a large contribution to the long-term depopulation of rural America. On average, about 1.5 million people left farms every year during the war, and the total farm population fell by about 20%. By 1950, metropolitan areas had grown by 1/5 and suburbs by 1/3.
It was people came from everywhere to work. It was just like a big melting pot, and it was farmers and things like that. People like that came. Some of them had never worked in carpentry or anything. They had farm skills.
But these newcomers weren't always welcomed by established communities, who feared and sometimes resented what seemed an invasion of visitors.
I must have gone to 6 different schools when we first moved to New Orleans. When we moved to the project, when we got there, it seemed like no school wanted the kids from the project. People kind of looked down on us because we were kind of, I guess, like in the country here, they call us come-heres. Well, we were come-heres in New Orleans. And when I was little, my grandfather was my step-grandfather, but he was the only grandfather I knew on my mother's side. he would sit me on his lap and he'd teach me French words. And when we came to New Orleans, my dad wouldn't let me speak French. He said people would look down on us if they knew we were Cajun. So I wasn't allowed to speak French, but my mother and I spoke French anyway.
The treatment that Sylvia and her family received was reflective of a general Southern attitude towards outsiders. As the 12 Southerners argued in "I'll Take My Stand," they saw these new residents and recent industrialization as a threat to Southern life. They feared the diversity of the new population and the urbanization caused would dilute the Southern identity and its agrarian tradition, and to some extent they were right. Following World War II, areas of the South continued to expand as a result of federal investments, military installations, and manufacturing plants. It broke from the idea that farming in rural areas was the mainstream Southern lifestyle, and it created a shared Southern identity that was both agrarian and industrial.